key new bills have been introduced in the Parliament on Monday, including one that seeks to repeal the MGNREGA and put in a new act in its place. This happens just days before the winter session of Parliament comes to a close. And that's what our editor, Seema Chishti, is going to talk about first in this episode of Seema Says. Hi, Seema.
Hi, Jahnavi. So yes, I think the parliamentary bills that have been introduced in a rush in the shortest session of Parliament convened so far. We've had a striking number of low days that Parliament meets, and this session is a travesty. We have such significant bills. MNREG, as you said, renamed as VBGRAMG, that's the name, and another bill called Shanti, SHANTI, an acronym, which is for nuclear power, a third, which is the higher education bill, and the fourth, which is the insurance bill. The finance minister had already said that they're committed to allowing 100% investment in insurance, outdated, rotten idea, but that was announced. That is now being put into play. So I think the way the government has kind of brought these bills in, there are a couple of points which kind of are disturbing. The first is how they were introduced. The fact of, I know the days of consultation are far behind, but we must in a parliamentary democracy insist that there is pre-legislative consultation with all kinds of stakeholders who are not in parliament, who inform government, they address those issues and then have bills. None of that has happened. It has suddenly been introduced and almost brought in as a surprise thing. So in what happened in the matter of Kashmir, or later with one which they want central agencies to have ways of, basically going after all opposition leaders and rendering them not able to occupy high office, that bill, that is also sitting now with the Joint Parliamentary Committee. So these bills have suddenly been brought in as surprise packages. That's very disturbing about, it doesn't speak very well of the health of our parliamentary democracy. The second thing is, of course, the content of bills. And I'm sure there's a lot of reading material on The Wire and on other newspapers have also looked at things. But from what I can say is this was a right that has brought in social change. MNREGA makes it a right. It is no scheme. It is not MNREGS. It is MNREGA. I have a right to ask my government to give me job. It gives me dignity. This is not about receiving a handout. It is not about whims of a government or about an electoral cycle. It's my right as a citizen of India who is poor in a rural area to demand work. Everything about it has been inverted. It is now a supply side thing, as in we will supply work for 125 days. And for 60 days, which are peak agricultural season, there will be no MNREGA work. Now, why is that bad? This is really bad because a peak time is when poor labourers who are landless otherwise are in demand. When MNREGA was also an option, it forced everybody to pay at least that amount, what they were getting as reasonable minimum wages. And they could actually choose. They were in a position to choose. You've taken that away because now they'll be forced to work for all manner of land holders and do jobs in peak seasons and not probably get paid adequately for it. So the government has allowed for that. So in all matters, this, it just completely reverses things, other than, of course, completely severely burdening the states. And in some cases, the centre has kept the discretion on itself that it can put the entire cost of the work project on the state. This completely takes away from the 90-10 ratio, 90 central scheme, 10 central payout and 10 to be handled by states. This completely reverses that. So it makes it any other centrally government, central sponsored scheme, whereas it was not a scheme, it was an act. So I think that's very worrying. And then the other thing, the very key thing, and this is something that, Mahatma Gandhi's grandson Tushar Gandhi wrote, that calling it G Ram G, I mean, if that's your excuse that you needed to go to Lord Ram's name to take out Mahatma Gandhi's name, to lose a reference on him, Tushar Gandhi says that it's almost as if taking the Ram from Nathuram's name, and that has been done. So trying to take out Mahatma Gandhi's name from this legislature, this completely landmark legislation, makes very clear what their intentions have always been in what they did with even Swachhta Abhiyan, to pick up bits and pieces of the Mahatma's symbols. That was just the glasses, then it'll probably be a walking stick. But to take away from the philosophy and the principles of Mahatma Gandhi that this regime is so devastatingly opposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Our second topic for today, we've been hearing from Pakistan that a former ISI chief, Faiz Hameed, has been sentenced to 14 years in prison by a military court. And the charges against him include violating state secrets and also political interference. So what is this all about?
It's really kind of very surprising. In fact, it's last year when he was taken into custody, and now this ruling that gives him 14 years of rigorous imprisonment. This is the first time that a DG ISI, which is meant to be running the show, I mean the deep state in Pakistan, and much written about and talked about, has been sentenced to prison. I don't think this is the end of the story. Faiz Hameed stood tall. He went to Afghanistan. There were these photo ops. He was standing very smartly in a suit and making these statements. But it seems that he has a major problem with Asim Munir, who's the present Field Marshal, the army chief, somebody who has got a lot more powers by the amendments to the Pakistani constitution, which were put into effect last month. But more than that, I think by saying that he wanted to overturn or do something to the Pakistani army to effect a change there, to almost effect a coup, is what they're saying, what they're suggesting to him. I think by doing this, they have cleared the path to making a case about Imran Khan being complicit in all this. Faiz Hameed was meant to be very close to Imran Khan, who's still in jail. There's been a lot of concern and worry about nobody being able to meet Imran Khan, and they say he's in the solitary, he's been kept there, and it's for weeks on end that his family has not been allowed to meet him. In fact, his ex-wife, Jemima Khan, the mother of his two children, from London, has actually petitioned Elon Musk, and according to her, her voice is being suppressed on social media, on his platform, and she's asked him to kind of find out what's going on. So I think it's a fairly dangerous situation. We've seen what happened when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in Pakistan was sentenced to death there, and that has really changed the course of Pakistani history, the Zia years, and what he did to the PPP chieftain. I don't know which way this will go, and one thing is, of course, that Pakistan now, of course, has a hybrid regime where the army does not want to overtly appear like it's in charge. But I think the anger, the annoyance, and the terror of Imran Khan is so intense that they are just not willing to let him out. So how this kind of plays out will be very interesting and will have consequences for its largest neighbor, India.
Yeah. For the third topic for today, the headlines around the historic low the rupee is hitting is now kind of a daily thing. Today we've seen it getting to 91 to the US dollar, and FII, or foreign institutional investor outflows, are being blamed for this. Can you talk about what's happening here?
Yeah, the rupee is kind of really, it's really concerning. And if there was one sort of signature emblem or, thing, the totem for the state of the economy, it would probably be the falling price of the rupee. And the falling price of the rupee is of grave concern. When this government took office in 2014, it was around 60, between 58 to about 62, around 60-ish. In 11 years, to be down to 90. And this is despite the RBI's intervention and a fair amount of foreign exchange being spent on shoring up the rupee, using dollars to keep the price up. I think this is of immense concern. There's an effort in India to kind of, with the establishment, to pretend that it's business as usual, and this is only because of external factors, etc., a little bit of an export glitch. But it reflects the absence of, as you said yourself, the foreign institutional investors, the FPI and the FDI has hit a low, a negative, which has kind of galloped this year. So even with the rupee, the fall between February to October in 2024 was only 0.6%. This year, in that same time, the fall has been 6%. So it's been a huge amount by which it has kind of fallen. Foreign institutional investors seem to think that Indian equities are overvalued. They seem to be going out and investing in China, in Indonesia. They'd rather be seen investing there, or they're just going out. And that's a matter of concern, because that is, again, a comment on how they see the Indian economy. With unemployment, with our data not being terribly kosher, the IMF calling it C-grade data. So the truth about the economy and its health is not coming out tops if you look at the kind of faith that FIIs have put here. So the outflows have hit record sums. Our foreign exchange reserves are also low, which is why the RBI has perhaps decided to take it a little easy on investing dollars to keep the rupee up. And of course, the tariffs with the US, and the Indian government must also answer as to how it allowed a situation like this, where the tariffs are 50%, when even on China it's 30%, Vietnam is 20%. How were they allowed to go so out of hand that 70% of our labor exports, whose component is mostly labor, they're down by 70%. that merchandise kind of low exports is also showing on the rupee. So of course, no doubt, there's a little bit of it which comes because of this rocky tariff situation, for which also the government of India needs to take stock and find out where things went wrong. But I think with this and the outflows and a general sense of the Indian economy not going places, certainly not looking and feeling like an 8.2% economy, I think we must really be concerned. And I don't know, it's probably just touched 91. I don't know if it'll close at 91 today, but that's a matter of grave concern.
Our final topic for today. So Netflix and Paramount are in a bidding war over Warner Brothers. Should we care?
Yeah, so a lot of people, I mean, whichever way this goes, I mean, Netflix, this big dada of, streaming, the streaming almost like, Silicon Valley version of streaming, as it were. And I remember Reese Hastings saying that their only enemy is now sleep. So Netflix is just fighting sleep, or the ability to stay sane of human beings. But Netflix kind of buying a legacy, traditional 100-year-old studio, which owns so much. I mean, they Casablanca to Spider-Man, as someone said, their spectrum is so wide of what they own. For them, buying Warner Brothers was anyway a bit of a big shock. It was almost like Silicon Valley swallowing Hollywood, and you had all those very hyperbolic kind of statements and commentary in the US press. Suddenly, it was anyway being seen as a bid to make a really big monopoly, and there was concern whether the regulators in the antitrust legislation in America would forbid it, and they would come down and disallow this and not allow this to happen. Along comes the US President, Mr. Trump, and he says that he'd rather have his friends putting in money to ensure a hostile takeover of Warner Brothers. Now, the thing is, while Netflix was buying only the streaming part of Warner Brothers and certain other rights to certain titles, etc., what Mr. Trump, it looks, has kind of now put in play, this hostile takeover by Paramount, is all of Warner Brothers. And an important part of Warner Brothers is CNN. And Mr. Trump has been calling CNN fake news, etc. So while there's one part of it that should concern us is the monopoly part of it. If a big streamer buys a big studio, so you have fewer choices for writers, artists, actors. You have fewer choices for people like us who watch it. Fewer themes being made, less exploration. You don't have which is what a healthy market should have. A lot of producers who are buying titles, who are buying story ideas and giving good wages and rates. So one is that concern. The second concern is that if Mr. Trump, who has just ensured that his friend Larry Ellison now has already bought CBS, where they've put somebody who hates what she's this so-called anti-woke, anti-left media person, Barry Weiss is running the show there. And now if they are able to have this merger now, this hostile merger, and they run CNN as well, you have the entire shaping of media turning into a completely authoritarian kind of media. So they have their own version of Godi media being put in play. And because it's American Godi media, that has implications on the rest of the world for the standards it sets and the stories that will be done and told. So everybody is watching this because whatever happens here, short of nothing happening, is of great interest. And it is unclear whether the next regime, should Mr. Trump leave or the Republicans lose office in 3 years, what would be the state of what would happen? But I think more than that, what would happen in the 3 years that these mergers, if either of these are allowed to go through, will have what bearing they'll have on the Infoverse.
Okay, time for your recommendations for this week.
Yeah, one very interesting kind of story. It's actually quite a scary story about a plutonium-laden sort of nuclear generator to spy on China, which apparently the CIA put in place with certain veterans of certain Indian officials, which they put in place in the mid-60s in the Himalayas, in Tibet, and it has apparently disappeared. So they apparently came down because there was some snowstorm there. The person running that show, called all the people down because he thought that they'll all lose their lives if they were to bring the device down. They left it there and it hasn't been seen since. And because it's plutonium and it gives out nuclear radiation energy that is heat generating, it has probably sunk in the glacier. So there's all kinds of speculation, according to this absolutely brilliantly done NYT New York Times story, on where this thing is, this beast is. Of course, it brings up other questions of what on earth was CIA thinking on planting this dangerous nuclear device? What were successive Indian prime ministers and the role of Morarji Desai, whose prime minister was known to be quite pro-America in the 70s, who comes in after Mrs. Gandhi first loses power in 1977, the kind of things he said to cover up for the CIA and the Americans. So it's like a riveting tale, and if it wasn't so dangerous, the idea of nuclear stuff going down the Ganga because it is situated in like a glacier that feeds the Ganga is very scary, but it's utterly bewitching to read that account. So maybe we can put that in the show notes.
Absolutely.
The second one is a book which was at one level a hard read, but a very instructive read, because this is Mahmood Mamdani, the scholar who also happens to be Zohran Mamdani's father. I never thought I'd be saying that. But his latest book called Slow Poison, he looks at the Uganda kind of phase, Idi Amin's coming to office, of endearing himself to Israel and Britain first, and then cutting them off, and then going after the Asians as well. So he explores that story in the context of colonial rule in Africa largely, particularly in Uganda. But there are a lot of takeaways there on how we in India think of identity and other things, and to look at all that in the context of the colonial imprint and the colonial jackboot on our heads. My recommendations. Yours?
So my first recommendation is a series that our colleague Sukanya Shanta has been working on the NIA and its investigations. Looking at, it has this very, very high conviction record. How does that come about, and is it actually something that should be bragged about? That's one. And the second, to return to brand of having less serious recommendations, is the new Knives Out movie.
You should take this very personally.
It's called Dead Man Wake Up, or Wake Up Dead Man. And it's a great fun mystery, very interesting, lots of twists.
Is it horror?
No, it's a murder mystery. Yeah. That's all for today. Thank you all for watching this episode of Seema Says. As always, if there's something you want Seema to talk about, please put that in the comments and we'll have her take it up in a future episode.